Banjo-Tooie might just be my favorite game of all time. That's not going to shock you if you've been following me for any amount of time, but that doesn't mean I'm blind to its issues. There are many common criticisms about Banjo-Tooie that I've heard. It's too big, it's too dark, objectives take too long, etc. And one that I've heard a lot is that the game has a ton of backtracking. You can find plenty of people complaining about this, and it got me wondering, just how much backtracking is there in Banjo-Tooie, and more importantly, can you avoid it entirely? So I put my nose to the grindstone, played through this game once again, accidentally entered the 90th spot on the Xbox leaderboard, which puts me roughly in the top 0.009% of Tooie players on the console, because why not? And determined the answer to the burning question: can you beat Banjo-Tooie without any backtracking? Let's find out. First things first, let's establish the rules of this challenge. Now, I don't have a good way to measure in-level backtracking, that is, traveling from one area of a level to another and then back again. Even if I avoided aimless wandering, finding a decent method of quantifying time spent just walking around is difficult. I can, however, track how many items you can't collect when visiting a world for the first time. For our purposes today, I will only be entering each world once, grabbing everything I can in one trip, and never going back. It doesn't matter which exit I leave the level from, whether it's the main entrance or a side exit that leads to another world, once I'm out, I can't return. That means if I can't grab a collectible until I visited a later world, then I have to leave it behind. This is true for the 8 main worlds, but since ILO Hags requires you to leave and come back to it frequently, that will operate a little differently. For each sub-area, I have to collect everything I can inside of it on my first visit. Afterwards, I can't touch anything should I return. I'm also only considering the intended method of completing these objectives. No shortcuts, tricks, or glitches will be considered until after the tally. I wanted to make the strictest challenge possible to see if we can eliminate backtracking entirely. Now, you Tooie fanatics might be thinking that based on those parameters, this challenge is already impossible. In order to explore Grunty Industries, you need to open up the train station inside the level, leave the world and hop onto Chuffy the train, and then finally enter through the station. This left me with a dilemma. Do I try to complete this challenge without ever visiting Grunty Industries, or do I make an exception? Well, it turns out that you have to enter it at some point because you need the claw clamor boots, so to even get this challenge off the ground, I will allow this one instance of backtracking since this is 100% required. Well, kinda, I'll explain later. I'm going to be tracking how many jiggies, JINJOS, notes, and Cheeto pages that we can grab under this rule set. I won't be covering globos, moves, or extra honeycomb pieces because even under these restrictions, we're still able to grab them all. And keep in mind, with all these collectibles, the only thing that matters as far as beating the game is that we need 70 jiggies to enter the final boss. So let's start with the ILO Hags, which has a smattering of collectibles that we're not able to get. Royston the Goldfish normally gives you double air and faster swimming, but we need the bill drill to rescue him, which we don't get until Glitter Gulch Mine, so we can't get either of those upgrades. We also can't collect either of the Banjo-Kazooie game packs in Spiral Mountain since one is locked behind the grip grab and the other behind grenade eggs and airborne egg aiming, but that's not a huge loss since these are completely optional. The third Banjo-Kazooie game pack in Jinjo Village also requires the grip grab to get to, so that's off limits as well. Because we can't get the ice key, and because it violates the visit a level once rule, that locks us out of getting the Dragon Kazooie transformation as well. But again, that's bonus content, so not a big deal. Now let's get to the stuff that really matters. Back in Spiral Mountain, there's a Jinjo under the waterfall which requires the Talon Torpedo from Jolly Roger's Lagoon, so we can't get that. There's 2 other Jinjos that we can't rescue either, one in Plateau hidden under a boulder which also requires the bill drill, and one in a high alcove in Clifftop which requires the claw clamor boots. That leaves us with 3 unattainable Jinjos, and we're just getting started here. Before we leave the hub world, the grip grab is also required to get this Trouble Clef on top of the red Jinjo house. This is the only note pile that can't be accessed without backtracking, as the other 880 notes are easily attainable, and that's more than enough to beat the game with. And since the only Jiggy we get here at first comes from King Jingaling, let's start our Jiggy tally off at 1 and go from there. Now on to the levels themselves, starting with Mayahem Temple. There's 2 Jiggies we can't get here, one of which is atop these pillars in the prison compound. You have to get into the pillars vault to knock the Jiggy down, but in order to open it, you, once again, need the bill drill. Then there's recovering Target Zan's relic for Chief Bloatazan, and here's where we come to a snag. Because you have to enter Pterodactyl Land one way or another to get the relic, then return to Mayhem to deliver it, it technically counts as backtracking. But because you can enter it from Mayhem Temple and grab the relic on your first visit while most of Pterodactyl Land is still blocked off, I don't think anyone would reasonably call this an actual instance of backtracking. Because it's against the rules I set out, I will call this uncollectible, but I'm going to mark examples like this, where you enter another world but only a sectioned off area that prohibits any further exploration until you visit that world as intended, as detour collectibles, which we'll be tallying during the breakdown as well. Anyway, that brings our total Jiggy count up to 9 so far, a respectable start. Moving on to Glitter Gulch Mine, which gives you an unattainable item right as you enter, with this Cheeto page above the entrance sign, which requires the springy step boots from Pterodactyl Land. We also can't rescue this JINJO from the water storage tank because in order to access it, we have to come from Jolly Roger's Lagoon, which we aren't allowed to do. Back in Mayhem Temple, Dilberta the rat is trapped and we have to free her with the Bill Drill, and since we can't do that, we thus can't collect the Jiggy from Bully and Bill. There's also the Jiggy inside the Power Hut basement, which requires Banjo and Kazooie to split up, which they don't learn until Witchy World. Finally, there's the Jiggy behind the waterfall, which also requires the springy step shoes, and when adding everything up, we're now at 16 Jiggies with 3 more Jiggies and another JINJO unaccounted for. Now let's head over to Witchy World, and thankfully, we can get nearly everything in here on the first trip. The only thing we can't do is find all of Mrs. Boggy's kids, since each one requires something different. Moggy and Soggy we can deal with no problem, but Groggy here can't move after you feed him a burger, and we can't get him back to his mom without Banjo's taxi pack from Pterodactyl Land. But besides that, everything else in this world is ours for the taking, bringing our total Jiggy count up to 25. Jolly Roger's Lagoon has 3 Jiggies that can't be obtained on your first visit, and weirdly enough, they're all on the surface. We can't hatch Tip Top's egg without first learning Hatch from Pterodactyl Land, so that's off the table. We also can't reach this Jiggy in the Smuggler's Cavern until Kazooie learns Glide in Hellfire Peaks, so we just have to leave it there to tempt us. Then there's the pigs in their pool, which requires a lot of steps to complete. First, we need to clean the pool by entering the drain pipe that's spewing garbage, but that takes us to a sectioned off area of Grunty Industries. There's nothing in here but the switch to turn it off, which technically makes this part of the Jiggy a detour, but warming the pool up requires far more effort. We first need to head to Cloud Cuckoo Land to sacrifice George the Ice Cube, then head to Hellfire Peaks to open up the floodgates for the water. That requires going back to a previously explored level, and as such, it can't count for this challenge. You might be wondering if we can enter Cloud Cuckoo Land first and knock George down before ever entering Hellfire Peaks, and we certainly can. But doing that means we're going to have to miss a ton of stuff in Cloud Cuckoo Land since we won't have the Shack Pack, and by extension, the Sack Pack, so it's not worth it to make this Jiggy attainable. Lastly, most of the underwater collectibles are good for the taking, but we can't grab the Cheeto page in the ancient swimming baths because that also requires Kazooie's Glide, so once we leave, we're up to 32 Jiggies. Pterodactyl Land is up next, and first on the agenda is Dippy's Watering Hole. Now, it's true that we can't get Dippy's Jiggy until we go to Cloud Cuckoo Land, as that's where the water Dippy needs is located. But Dippy gives us this Jiggy automatically, we don't have to go back to get it, so I'm ruling this Jiggy as backtracking free. There is, however, an unobtainable Cheeto page inside Dippy's pool which we can't grab until it's full, and that does require going back to this world. Moving on, there's 2 Jiggies we actually can't obtain here, and strangely enough, both involve helping characters stricken with a problem. First, there's Scrotty's family of Styracosaurus, which each has an individual issue. We can rescue Scrut from Witchy World on our first pass there, then call the train from inside Pterodactyl Land, so that's fine, and we can help Scrit by using Mumbo Jumbo inside the cave. However, while we can take Scrat from the cave, put him in the train, head to the cliff top, and heal him with Mumbo's magic, we can't take him back to Pterodactyl Land as that's against the rules. Sorry, Scrotty, but 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Then there's the Oogle Boogles, who are all cold and starving, so we have to bring them heat via the fire eggs and food from Witchy World. Normally, we can't smuggle food out of Witchy World because Grunty magically takes your food away when you exit the level, and the only entrance where that doesn't happen is a direct link from the Oogle Boogles cave. We can easily head to Witchy World from this entrance, but again, that violates the rules, and even still, we need the Claw Clamor boots to get back to Pterodactyl Land this way. It is possible to get food out by leaving Witchy World via the train and exiting the cab before Grunty has time to take it all away, but there's no way for us to enter Pterodactyl Land via the train without opening the station in the level first. The only station we could possibly use without backtracking is the ILO Hag station, which we can't even open until getting the split up move from Witchy World first, so this method unfortunately doesn't help us. With all that said, our total count at the end of Pterodactyl Land gets us up to 40 jiggies. Now onto Grunty Industries, which is certainly dense and confusing and has a ton of in-level backtracking already, but again, we're focusing on getting everything we can in one go. This Jinjo in the water tank is only accessible from Jolly Roger's Lagoon and is completely sealed off otherwise. That makes this a detour Jinjo, but for now, we do have to leave him behind. We've also got 3 jiggies that need to be skipped, starting with the one awarded by beating the tin tops on the first floor. You're intended to use the glide to reach this, even though it is very easy to reach this platform without it. The Banjo-Tooie strategy guide by Nintendo Power says you need the glide though, so I'm going with that as the intended method. Then in the waste disposal plant on the basement level, there's a jiggy across the pool of toxic waste that Banjo can cross once he has the sack pack from Cloud Cuckoo Land. Also in the basement, behind the giant fan room and the air conditioning plant, you can find a jiggy under the same toxic waste which requires the shack pack from Hailfire Peaks. Without those objectives, that leaves us with 47 total jiggies now. Onward to Hailfire Peaks, and right away, we have a jiggy that we could have collected earlier. Across the Stomping Plains in Pterodactyl Land, there's a solo banjo switch that opens the gate to an otherwise unreachable area in Hailfire Peaks, but we need the snooze pack from Grunty Industries first. So even though this would otherwise be a detour jiggy, because we're not able to get there on our first trip through Pterodactyl Land without violating the rules, we have to leave this one behind. We also can't get the Coliseum Kickball jiggy since we'd have to travel back to Mayahem Temple to get the Stony transformation, which is a no-go. And lastly, there's the oil drill, and this one is a case of so close yet so far. Everything you need to do for this jiggy is done in Hailfire Peaks, but for some reason the jiggy appears in Grunty Industries' basement, even though it counts as a Hailfire Peaks jiggy. It's an isolated area, so this does count as a detour jiggy, but still, ugh. Anyway, that gets us to 54 jiggies, and since the last world, Cloud Cuckoo Land, is designed to be reached with all the moves collected, and we can easily get Canary Mary to appear here, unfortunately, there's no collectibles in here that we can't grab, bringing our total count to 64 jiggies. So let's take stock of what we've got. Without any backtracking, we've collected 64 out of 90 jiggies alongside 40 out of 45 Jinjos, 22 out of 25 Cheeto pages, and 880 out of 900 notes. We're 6 jiggies shy of the 70 needed for the final boss, so does that mean we can't beat Banjo-Tooie without backtracking? Well, before we answer that, let's talk about the Jinjos. Your goal with the Jinjos is to reunite each colored family, and collecting all the Jinjos in a family grants you a jiggy automatically. The places where Jinjos are hidden are always the same, but their colors are randomized, so each time you play, each Jinjo will have a different color. There are 33 Jinjo patterns in the game, randomly selected once you start a new file. We're only interested in these 5 Jinjos right here, as they're the ones that can't be collected without backtracking. Each row represents a pattern, and if there's even one instance of a color still remaining after removing the Jinjos we can save, then we know that we can't save that Jinjo family and won't get their jiggy. Now again, our jiggy count so far is 64, meaning we need to rescue 6 Jinjo families to reach the 70 jiggy requirement. Taking all that into account, here's the number of Jinjo families we save for each of these patterns, and you'll notice that not all of them reach 6. In fact, 12 out of the 33 patterns give us an insufficient number, most save 5 families, and one unlucky pattern only nets you 4. That means there's about a 36.3% chance that you won't save the required amount of families. So taking all of that into consideration, our final item tally without any backtracking is 22 Cheeto pages, 880 notes, 40 Jinjos, and depending on your luck, between 68 and 71 jiggies. With the fluctuating jiggy count due to random chance, I have to conclude that it is not completely possible to beat Banjo-Tooie without backtracking. Unless you count the detour collectibles. Now remember, we were keeping track of those too. Let's start with that Jinjo in Grunty Industries, which can only be accessed from Jolly Roger's Lagoon. Again, depending on your pattern, this could net you another jiggy, so let's quickly head back to the chart. Even if we just collect this Jinjo and nothing further, we can already reduce the number of unsuccessful patterns from 12 to 2, bringing our percentage of a bad seed down to 6.1%. And because that unlucky 4 family pattern gains a Jiggy when considering this swing, the minimum number of saved families rises to 5, meaning our minimum Jiggy total is now 69, still one off from the coveted 70. Thankfully, we can easily knock that out with 2 detour Jiggies. First is the Sacred Relic from Mayhem Temple, which requires a quick trip to the Unga Bunga's cave in Pterodactyl Land. Then we have the Oil Drill in Hailfire Peaks, which, again, inexplicably appears in Grunty Industries. 2 easy Jiggies to grab and we've hit our required count. Redoing our tally, we now have an additional Jinjo and 2 more Jiggies, with a potential 3rd Jiggy depending on the pattern. So we'll have between 71 and 74 Jiggies. Given all that, I can say for real that it is completely possible to beat Banjo-Tooie without backtracking. But let's see how far we can push it. See, until now, I've only been going by what the game expects you to do in order to complete tasks. So let's say we ignore that and take some sneaky shortcuts while still abiding by the no backtracking rule. First, we actually can grab that treble clef in Jinjo Village without the grip grab with a somewhat precise beak buster off of this window, meaning we can collect all 900 notes. This move sends Banjo up slightly before he slams down, and you can take advantage of that by moving towards the ledge, which, with Banjo's height boost, gets you up there easily. This is a very useful little trick that makes a lot of shortcuts possible, such as the next one in Mayhem Temple. That Jiggy atop the pillars can be grabbed by jumping off of the pillars with the Talon Trot, feathery flapping at the right time, then using the Beak Buster to get an extra bit of height and extend the jump. The timing is a little strict, but with some practice, this one's a cinch to grab. We can also get that Cheeto page at the Glitter Gulch Mine entrance by just jumping off the rope here and flapping onto the sign, something so incredibly easy to do that I'm wondering why they even bothered to put the springy step shoes there. The Power Hut Jiggy is easy to get without splitting up to turn on the lights by just carefully navigating the dark room, either by using fire eggs or cranking up the brightness on your TV. In Jolly Roger's Lagoon, once we have the Wing Whack, we can become Solo Kazooie, grab the Turbo Trainers inside Blubber's shop, head into the Smuggler's Cavern through Jolly's basement, and with the right timing, jump as the timer for the shoes wear off, feathery flap, then Wing Whack to get enough distance to get this Jiggy without gliding. Jump too early and you won't be able to flap before you end up beneath the platform. Jump too late and you won't have enough speed to get over there. Another simple trick, if a little hard to pull off with the right timing. In Pterodactyl Land, that Cheeto page inside Dippy's watering hole can be nabbed with a precise Clockwork Kazooie egg shot while the pool is still drained. The positioning is pretty precise and otherwise, the clockwork will miss or explode on impact, but it's definitely possible. As I said earlier, Banjo needed to grab the snooze pack in Grunty Industries before he could trek through the Stomping Plains alone. However, if you jump at just the right time and at just the right angle, you can actually clip through Stomponodon's foot and avoid its hitbox, letting Solo Banjo get across with ease. There's actually a pretty neat setup for this trick that makes it pretty consistent. Shoutouts to GoGo TBC for detailing this, their video on it is in the description. Now again, this counts as a detour since it leads to the Jiggy trapped behind the ice wall in Hellfire Peaks, but with this trick, we can just grab it and go without going against the rules. Finally, let's do some shortcuts in Grunty Industries, starting with getting in there in the first place. If we go to the fire exit door on the back outside, you'll notice that there's a small gap on the left-hand side. By lining up a shot there, we can launch a Clockwork Kazooie egg inside and use that to hit the switch to open up the door, letting us enter without having to leave and come back. So that exception to the rules for entering Grunty Industries is irrelevant. Like I previously mentioned, it is super easy to get across the gap to reach the Tin Tops fight just by jumping and feathery flapping as Solo Kazooie, meaning the glide is really unnecessary here. Alternatively, we can also get up there by using this shock jump pad as Solo Kazooie, which lets us clip through the railing and initiate the fight. Lastly, we can cross the toxic waste in the basement without the sack pack by jumping in and out of the toxic waste as quickly as possible, since the waste doesn't spit you out until you've been in there for a little while. If you do all of those tricks after getting all the non-backtracking items, you bring your total Jiggy count up to between 74 and 77 Jiggies. By factoring in the other detour collectibles again, our actual final tally for everything rests at 24 Cheeto pages, 41 Jinjos, 900 notes, and between 77 and 80 Jiggies. And that's not even the farthest you could go. I left out some tricks that are either only possible on the Nintendo 64 version or that are way too difficult for me to pull off, so this tally could be even higher. So if there was still any doubt left, we can pretty definitively state that it is completely possible to beat Banjo-Tooie without backtracking. Okay, I really am done now. Look, I didn't make this video to prove any kind of point. I'm not trying to claim anything about the backtracking in Banjo-Tooie except that the amount of necessary backtracking is 0. You can conclude from that it isn't as pervasive a problem as some make it out to be, or that even if the amount isn't that high, the fact that there is any to begin with still turns you away. Either viewpoint is valid, and if you still don't like the backtracking, that's perfectly alright, more power to you. Really, I did this primarily to satisfy a curiosity of mine, and hopefully, I've satisfied it for some of you as well. With that said, if you enjoyed this video, then give it a like, leave a comment, and be sure to subscribe and click that bell to be notified when new videos go live. This was a new video format for me, and a fun one to do. I don't know if I'll do another one soon, but if I do, what other challenges would you like to see me tackle? Until next time, this is Cloud Connection, signing off.